Welcome to the Musician Technician Entrepreneur Podcast, sponsored by the Digital Audio Recording Arts at the University of St. Francis in Joliet, Illinois. My name is Alby Odum, and my co-host is Gabe Jaskowiak. Today on our podcast, we have film composer Jermaine Stegall. After receiving a graduate certificate from USC's Scoring for Motion Picture and Television program in 2004, Jermaine Stegall began working closely with composer Marco Beltrami on films such as I, Robot, Flight of the Phoenix, and Scream 4. This ultimately led to many opportunities to work as an orchestrator and conductor of original and additional music for film and television for such studios as Warner Brothers, Lionsgate, Dimension Films, Fox Digital Studio, NBC Universal Television, VH1, and CW Television. Jermaine participated in the 2016 Sundance Composer Labs held at Skywalker Ranch. During the labs, Jermaine worked closely with composers Harry Gregson-Williams, Christophe Beck, and the Skywalker Sound Design team. Jermaine Stegall has scored over 20 feature films, some of which have been released theatrically in the US, Mexico, and Colombia. A few of Jermaine's film scoring credits include the theatrical release of Jamesy Boy, directed by Trevor White on Phase 4 Films, and Badge of Honor on Anchor Bay Films, directed by Agustin. Jermaine scored for the teen comedy Mono for Fox Digital Studio, which was released on Netflix. His music can also be heard in episodes of Best Friends Whenever, Liv and Maddie, which both air on Disney Channel, and Season 2 of Supergirl on the CW network. We'd like to thank our guest host, Gabe Jaskowiak, Jake Taheny, and Don Stinson, who graciously introduced us to today's guest, Jermaine Stegall. My name's Alby Odum, and I teach here at the Digital Audio Recording Arts program. Glad you're here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And Jeff Jaskowiak, I work with them. Alby, I teach here, and we run these podcasts every couple weeks.
I'm Gabe Jaskowiak. I'm an alum from here, and currently I work at Chicago Recording Company.
I'm Don Stinson, the band director at Joliet Central, and I'm starting here at St. Francis in January.
All right.
Because why not? Get another degree. Go ahead
really?
here. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So,
Well, congrats.
oh yeah.
Jermaine Stegall here, alum of Huffer Junior High School here in Joliet, Joliet Central High School. I'm a film composer working in the Los Angeles area now. I'm actually living in Burbank, and happy to be here, relating and reuniting and connecting with folks like Don, who's taking over obviously a great legacy at Joliet Central, and just looking to honestly, like at this point in my life, really find ways of expending my extra creative energy towards giving back to anyone that might benefit from it in any way. I've gotten to the point where I've started to develop a little bit, relationship with some of the colleges that I'm an alumni with, and I was telling Don that I feel like that, I'd really like to focus, a lot of the most, important creative, inspirational energy towards, the city of Joliet as opportunities arise to do that. And I think this is the beginning of opportunities to do that, so it's cool to be here.
I don't know how to follow that up. I'm Jay. I'm a student of Alby and Jeff's here at the University of St. Francis.
And both of these guys, too, do a lot of work in film. That's some of their favorite stuff. That's why partly they're here today. Well, you know what? I kind of like to hear your story and like what kind of things you were involved with when you were here in Joliet with, Ted. Ted was your band. Like what instruments were your focus? And then what led you to Southern California?
So, it's funny, where do I start? First instrument was violin, third grade. I played for about 3 weeks. Didn't like to practice because of the posture thing. So the next year in fourth grade, all the wind and brass and percussion instruments were introduced to us in terms of something that we might be able to pick and play or take lessons on. I decided that saxophone was that's my instrument for sure. I was denied that opportunity because I quit the violin so quickly, and my parents said that if I waited a year and I still wanted to play sax, then I could do it. So I started in 5th grade, and then didn't have lessons till about maybe 6th or 7th grade. Went to Hufford, was in their music program, did jazz, obviously, marching and concert band, as everyone has to. And then, not to go through too much chronology, but I do remember at a certain point hearing the Hufford Junior High Jazz Band and being kind of blown away by their top jazz players in junior high. They had a reputation, and that Stanley Gorbakian that was his last year there. He had been there for a long time, had a great legacy of having great bands there. And we had a new band director, Wesley Russell, who had just come from Texas and had all these interesting, strict, a new level of discipline was being introduced. And it was kind of interesting. It wasn't just fun and band and silliness. And then at a certain point, I would say around 8th grade, I guess for whatever reason, our 8th grade dinner or something at Hufford had the Joliet Central big band come and play at one of our events, and I remember being blown away by the next level of expertise. And I think along this time it was being confirmed that I was going to have a career in music at some point. Like, this is something I was definitely kind of, I don't say addicted to, but this is going to be a major part of my life. This lush sounds that they got from a big band, it was almost like, it's hard to really, describe any other way, but almost like, not really orchestral or symphonic, but there was something very polished and very rich about the sound that they were getting. It wasn't just jazz. It was there was a balance and a level of, just a level of balance I'd never really heard live before in terms of live music. And then I was involved in obviously Joliet Central's bands. I played saxophone still all throughout that. I don't know if you want to know every detail. I was drum major at Hufford in junior high. I was the Louis Armstrong Jazz Award winner in 8th grade. I still have that award on my,
Your name's probably
on my
on the
office
wall
right
in there.
now. Yeah, maybe. It hasn't been
Engraved.
taken down. So throughout high school, saxophone, did all that stuff. Was student conductor. I think might have been vice president of band at Central. Whatever the outstanding senior award was, did that thing. And I remember Ted Liga, because he knew I was serious about saxophone and wanted to continue music. And so he recommended a private saxophone teacher. It was all about who you're going to study with in terms of choosing a college for music. If instrumental performance was going to be your thing, it was about the teacher and where they were. So Northern Illinois University, teacher Steve Duke, his brother, Chris Liga, had studied with for a little while. And so he had a really positive result from that. So I went there and studied saxophone with him for 4.5 years. And it couldn't have been more perfect because it was, as I began to become more interested in film music along the way, even though Steve Duke was a saxophone teacher, he kind of had this magical way of incorporating whatever one was interested. There's some people that were more interested in piano, some are interested in arranging or jazz or conducting. Like, he found ways within, whether it be saxophone quartet or private lessons, of helping support whatever that other vision was. So it was just like a really nice place to really, set up shop and really get to know the students. By the end of backing up to, I would say 95 was when I graduated Joliet Central and went to Northern. And that was the year the movie Apollo 13 came out. And James Horner did that score. And, growing up, this is trying to tie all this stuff together. My father, for the most part, not so much now, but for many years, I would say probably 20 or 30 years, would go see at least 2 to 3 movies a week. sometimes not knowing what they were until he got there or whatever. And so films, they were always something that were, playing. My older brother would make film libraries on VHS tape for me growing up. So movies was like literally a part of our culture and our DNA. So anyway, this movie Apollo 13, when the ship took off to go to the moon, and that I just remember this moment where a light bulb went off, and it was like, I think I want to do that. Like, I think that might be some. I don't know how I'm going to tie saxophone into that, but like there was something so on purpose about the synchronization of the sound and music to those images that I was seeing, that it was like a lasting impression of a place that I can remember as a marker in my life, where I knew, like, okay, my life is different somehow today. And so then went to college, and my soundtrack, obviously, collection started to grow as I became more interested in composition and obviously this never-ending love of cinema. But I began, I would say, probably experimenting, and I was encouraged by, faculty members, other students, to just experiment, write, maybe have things played in saxophone quartet, maybe have a jazz band read through something or whatever. And like I said, that school was kind of perfect for me in that I was able to develop relationships with students to the point where by the time I was in my 5th year, where I only had like maybe 2 or 3 required courses to finish the music performance degree, I ended up planning out an orchestral recital for the spring. I started in the fall, where I rehearsed like maybe once or twice in the fall. Most of it was handwritten scores and parts back then, because I was still learning finale. And I would say during this time of the NIU years, and this is kind of answering a big question, how did I get to Burbank? But I saw the movie Scream, which came out in '96. I saw it over the summer of '97 on VHS tape. It had a cold open, which means there's no credits in the beginning. It just kind of starts. And I remember the music was very dissonant. It was very different. It wasn't very melodic, so to speak. There was something, there was this mix of synth electronics. It was, for the time, for me, it was like a huge lasting impression in terms of like, this is really going, who did, I couldn't stop, who did this music? Like, there were no credits. I paused the end of the movie, and it kept, focused on this name. Marco Beltrami is the composer of this movie. Marco, I kept repeating it to myself and like asking people about it. The internet wasn't really a big thing, at that point. But after discovering who he was, I found out that he had gone to USC and did their film scoring program. And then in my, I think, 3rd year at NIU, I met someone that also had gone to NIU maybe 8 years before me, and had also gone to USC, but was coming back to do his master's. And I was like, okay, there's something about this USC thing. Maybe I need to, consider it seriously. So, many signs pointed to USC as a place to end up at some point. And so, again, I wasn't able to declare composition ever as a major at NIU. I put many portfolios together and tried to submit, did all the things that they asked, and I was never invited to be a part of the official program. And so when I graduated, towards the end of that, around 2000, I decided to just basically apply to composition schools at a master's level in California. I applied to Mills College. I don't know why I did that. That was a wasted submission. UCLA, and they have and still have a film extension course, a film music, film scoring extension class, and USC in their master's in composition department. Got rejected from all 3. Was completely, in my mind, devastated and didn't know what to do. But about half of the faculty at NIU had gone at that time to the University of North Texas, which has obviously a great reputable program, and they all encouraged me to just apply there. And there were some connections that maybe we can, make some calls and we'll see what happens. So I ended up applying there. I was an undeclared major. I went there for a year doing deficiencies. So after that, for 2 years, I did a master's in composition. Obviously studied conducting and whatnot, and then towards the end of it, my second, the penultimate year or whatever, I applied to USC early because I heard that there's a waiting list, and I was like, if I get out of here and I don't have anything to do, like I don't know what to do, so I'm gonna at least get on the waiting list maybe. I got on the waiting list. It was perfect. I ended up getting married, so I had this like idea that, okay, as a married couple, like we could at least go to Los Angeles and there was something to do. I wasn't just like struggle and be random in the hustle, because there's obviously that aspect of it. So, and so anyway, we got married, and then we moved to California, and I started the USC Film Scoring program, which is a 1-year program. And then I was like, okay, now I'm in LA. Like I made it out here. Like that's kind of the story of how I actually ended up being there. And you know, obviously USC's, you know, their biggest, I think, selling point, you know, as people had promoted, you know, over the years, was that you're, number one, you're in Los Angeles. It's not like you're having to, you know, try to make connections with people that are really doing it in the industry from far away. And then two, there's student filmmakers all over the place. There's literally, I don't know what the number is. It's like, there's several hundred student films that are produced each semester. So there's opportunities for, whether you're a student in that program or just someone in town, to find something to write music to. And obviously, you know, USC had, you know, and still has a lot of resources in terms of ways of recording on campus or whatever, or musicians that maybe want to get into the industry of recording for film and TV later, whether it be engineers or players. There's kind of a hub of people that actually want to do that specifically in a town that it's most vibrant in. So I felt like it made sense to kind of, for me, like I kind of stuck with the academic route of pursuing film music. And I will say that, you know, that's not necessarily the only route. And many, I would say probably half of the people that are successfully doing it now did not do it the academic way. You know, that was just, it's just one way to try. And it's become, you know, a very popular avenue in the sense that, you know, universities have more resources than they did before. Samples are better, technology is better, microphone, you know, gear is better. So there's places where you can get exposure to a lot more of those things than you could if you were just buying that stuff outright, you know.
Well, my favorite part of that story is as an artist, you hear he saw Apollo 13 and he's inspired, and it's so innocent and childlike, you know, and again, and I love that part of it, because that's like great just to hear that. And then there's the realistic part of me that's just wondering, how'd you make money when, you know, like, how did you support yourself? I think this could be helpful to a lot of people going this way.
I didn't.
But, but you know, like, how'd you make ends meet as you know, in your 20s or so? I know you said you were married.
Yeah, when I was,
went out there.
yeah, so when I went to North Texas, you know, over the years between, and I remember that was the funny thing when I graduated from NIU. Like I was like, okay, like I'm still not even sure I'm going to grad school. I know I have to go. I know I want to go like this year. I don't want to wait. I was sure of it. I ended up bearing telephone wire for, I don't know if Ameritech is still around, for a phone, you know, phone company for the first summer after I, you know, was out, and then again drove to Texas after that job was over, and I think I ended up doing some recording work. There was a job posting somewhere on a bulletin to make it just a little bit more than minimum wage, recording concerts, you know, which was super easy. It was like, my title was recording technician. I literally just hit record, set up a couple of stereo mics, and that was it. While I was there, it was just a part-time supplemental income. It wasn't really like helping pay, you know, rent or anything, sure. But it was, you know, it was something. And it was also, you know, I thought it was important to do something that was somewhat in the vicinity of the field that I was working in. So it's not, you don't kind of hate your life during the day and like, you know, living in a fantasy world at night. And then after that first year of school at North Texas, pursuing the master's in music, I came back, buried telephone wire again for another summer. It was way better money than I could have found doing any music job full time over the summer. So for like 2.5, 3 months, I did that for 2 summers, and then I think after the second year, that third summer or the second summer before I started my third year, I stayed in Texas. I recorded, but I did something else on the side. I can't remember what it was, but you know, for me, as far as getting married right before we moved to LA, like, really financial aid was the only way to survive in LA. The USC film scoring program is very intensive. Like it's taking, people from varying degrees of experience, and there's a lot of class time, and there's a ton of out-of-class work that needs to happen, things that literally just take time. Some people are just learning the gear. Some people have experience in studios, but even if you have experience, there's all kinds of things that are set up. You're going to major scoring sessions for the first time. You're going to TV and music conferences that are in town. You have, to us, celebrity composers coming in to talk, and there's a lot of things to do. So there's zero time for extra work, I would say, in that program specifically. And the reason I say that is because I'm following still some students that are in that program now, and I've kept a little bit of a relationship up with some of the faculty there, and it's not changed in that way. So that program specifically, there's no time to do extra work, but I think it's of benefit to look for something that's in the realm of your field of expertise, because you never know where that might lead. And one of the things I will say in terms of, I know you're interested in talking about multiple streams of income for students, is most of the teachers that go through there will tell people that, one, as you get out of a place like USC or any professional program, you need to, you must try to explore every avenue that's available to you at that time within your field, whether it be, for us as composers, orchestrating or conducting, or video games, or there's all kinds of other, there's a lot of people, like, on their websites, they don't just say composer, it's like composer for media, or multimedia composer, or film, TV, video games, and multimedia. Just letting people know that they, that there's also an understanding that there are different approaches to scoring each of those different things too. And I remember the big thing of, in 2003, almost every film composer that would come and talk to us said that at that time, video game budgets for recording video game scores were like way beyond film scoring budgets because of the popularity, and then also the way the creatives think in the video game world. Like, they kind of want the composer to, sky's the limit, like sometimes 90, 100-piece orchestras for several, 5 days, 8 days, or whatever at Sony or some, London or whatever, which it's like the maximum budget you can possibly imagine for some of those things. So, yeah.
So would you say that, like North Texas State, that doing the masters there, pretty much grounded you then for moving out to
It was interesting because, again, they were like, look, we're about composition here. We don't teach film scoring. We don't know how to help you specifically with that. There was actually a teacher there that was kind of passing through, did a couple of adjunct courses that had some experience, a guy named Alan Oldfield, that taught a course in, I can't remember what the name of it was, but it had something to do with scoring, basically. And there was kind of a jingle writing course those are basically the only two academic things that were available within the School of Music, but weren't a part of the composition program. They weren't really towards the degree even. But it was a place that, and that was the first place, if I was going to get players together, like, I had to actually pay them. Because, again, like, when you're in grad school, you don't have a lot of time to just socialize and make relationships and fantasize about, free recording sessions. Did a lot of that undergrad. I'm laughing. But yeah, and again, like at North Texas, like I wrote a lot for, jazz is a big part of my background. I actually played alto in the jazz bands. They have, I think it was like something like 10 lab bands there. I played alto in the 3 o'clock, lead alto in the 3 o'clock, the second to last year before I decided I really need to kind of put saxophone, which is a huge part of my life, on the back burner and focus, pretty specifically on something that I haven't really done much of.
Was that a tough choice?
And it kind of was. Because, even now, like, I feel like, later today I'm supposed to get together some saxophone buddies from high school, and, like, for the most part, a lot of them still play. Like, I was like the guy doing all the solos in high school, and, like, the last time I played was probably, I don't know, maybe 9 months ago. It's like the time in between gets further and further now.
He
As
probably
I
left his read on then.
Yeah,
too. That's what all the sax
actually,
players do. Did you
there are-
really?
No, I
don't
didn't. But
say
there's
that.
a lot of reads that like maybe I have like 15 reads that I've had for like 2 years.
Yeah.
I like try to flatten like every time it goes back to. You're like, oh man, like this one looks literally like a tidal wave. How's this gonna happen? When I'm gonna record myself on a demo or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of a tough choice, and especially like, and because North Texas is like it's so reputable for jazz, and if you're a player, I mean, all the rivers run to playing in the 1 o'clock jazz band. Like it's all about that. Like it's not as much about writing or being this or being that or soloist. It's about did I get, and as a resume thing, or for many people that want to teach, did you play you went to North Texas, did you play in the 1 o'clock? Like that's the whole thing. So
Yeah, in fact, our dean,
Yeah.
Bob Case, went there to Texas, and he was in the 1 o'clock.
Oh.
He's a trumpet player.
Yeah.
He was there when Lyle Mays was
Oh,
there back in the day.
I mean that carries plenty of weight.
I would have
know?
been the 12:55 p.m. The guy practicing, they kick out.
Oh no. But the 1 o'clock was open to reading composition all the time. They ended up reading one or two of my charts. Neil Slater was there at the time. He was very, very passionate about jazz composition, which as specific as his vision was for that program, like that was, I think, very important to him. And I think there's no way I would have gotten pieces read by them had he not cared about people that were serious about their craft getting the opportunity to have the best players in the school read your stuff and record it and think about it and listen to it and revise it stuff and maybe bring it in a second or third time. Like he allowed me to do things like that. I don't think the orchestra played any of my stuff there, but yeah, it was an opportunity to experiment. I got into electronic music there. I dabbled my first ventures in sampling at that time. That was before I discovered Contact, the Native Instruments Contact program. And I just imagined that one day there would be a program where literally I could record a sound or scraping inside the piano or something and manipulate it in Pro Tools or, there's all these random programs that, I don't even use anymore that I was using then to manipulate sample recordings, and that I would be able to map it to a keyboard one day and like actually trigger them. And I was like, I know this stuff. I made 2 or 3 CDs worth of different samples that I was like, I'm gonna just use this one day, and for now I'm just literally gonna drop them in my session. Back then that was called tape music, that was an old term when they used to, attach actual pieces of tape to magnetic tape and have kind of collages of sound and different things. And the early electronic music of mine was, here's a tape piece. We're gonna go and have a concert of all tape pieces, and we used to do that. Electronic music. So yeah, it was a huge ground for just experimentation, and I hope that there are a lot of universities out there that allow experiment, because that's really where the crux of that stuff is learned. I mean, when I would have composition lessons there, I remember thinking, I want my teacher to tell me what note I'm supposed to go to next. Like I really want them to teach me this note is better than that note. And really we talked about just the layout of scores and the formalities and the graphic notation of the way things looked and the rules of the way things looked really in composition lessons a lot of the time. And I remember feeling like, there was a certain point where someone had listened to a professor at that time that I really respected, and he said, very creative composition here, Jermaine, but graduate level, not quite. And he had that look on his face like, I don't know how to break it to you, but I want to be honest. He didn't say that, but I could tell exactly what he said. And I thought to myself, I know that you're right. Like, I feel it in my gut that I just haven't been doing this long enough to even say that this is graduate level, whether I get my master's next year or not. Like, you need time and experimentation, like is, trying things. It's all about that. And even, as people do scoring sessions in LA, like, the magic is really happening when people are playing the music that you've written, whether there's certain things that sound really good on samples because certain things are easier to sample than others. And that sometimes influences the composition or the score because it's easier to get a cue approved by a director when the samples sound good. And so experimenting, the learning, the tricks, that stuff happen. You find those things out at sessions where you're doubling this instrument with that, or.
So how important is the technology portion of it? Can you be an old school composer and just write notes on a page and submit that and have a career, or is that time just done unless you're John Williams?
That time has come and gone.
Okay.
Unless you're John Williams, there was a time where there were about 3 or 4 composers that were hanging on to that legacy because they were the only guys that could get that old Hollywood sound. But it's gone now. John Williams is the final. From what I know, he's the last guy that can get away with writing it down, pencil and paper, and really checking himself on piano. Not necessarily using the piano to write the music, but he checks himself on piano. And then a director. When I say a director, I mean Spielberg or J.J. Abrams. Last year, he doesn't work with a lot of directors. He's 83, 84 years old. Play the score back on piano, the entire score from his sketches for the director, and say that it will sound something like this when we get to the session, and it should be okay. And of course, it's the best thing anyone ever heard. But he's the only guy. You must have chops to either yourself or have someone or a team. Most composers that are, at the A level have some sort of team where either someone's helping them program the cues in or cleaning up their programming so that they can quickly write a cue and then have someone else clean it up so that it's quantized and doesn't sound super jarbled, But the idea is out, the theme is out. It's,
So that's an important part of your workflow then, is actually spending time demoing what it is you wrote to the director so that they will accept it. So it's there's a big part of engineering in that then.
Yeah, if you're recording, there are a lot of composers that, they're a player or whatever growing up. That's a part of them as being a musician, and they have to record as a part of their composition process. We call it mocking up a score. Their mock-up process, they have to record because they have to do something visceral to help make it, help realize that with the storytelling of the music with the picture, and producing that sound, meaning cleaning up things or, wrong notes or tuning things, making them sound at a certain level. People, it's expected that one comes with the tools to do that if you're going to call yourself a composer, or you have someone that's going to help you get it to that point where it's presentable,
So composer is turned into basically someone that creates, and now you're also a technician.
Especially at the beginning level,
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys that, are kind of not necessarily unrefined, but they've been doing it so long, maybe 20 years. Say some of the top 10 or so composers that don't have to sit there and tweak their score to get it to sound absolutely great. It's really about getting the rough composition out.
You have
and
to
having
mark
someone,
right?
Yeah.
So it's just
it's
you're a lot of things.
Oh yeah, the marketing, that's definitely become a part of it. The subtle marketing that's happening all the time. Obviously, if there's a way of, dismissing those tasks to someone else, that's obviously preferred, because the more someone, dwells in their kind of creative space, they can really get better and faster and more effective at being creative and basically answering the musical questions that, when you get that blank picture of, okay, we need a score, you can spend more time coming up with something that either that's creative or different or interesting or more memorable, if you're not sitting there trying to figure out, how am I going to get more follows on Instagram? Because that stuff is actually important, because, there's a point where, and I remember where MySpace came and went in terms of a place to, if you don't have a MySpace page, people would rather go, there was a time where people would rather go to your MySpace page than your website, because it was a place that you can quickly reference things it was kind of it's almost like I don't know, like a ground floor of, who's doing what in any, whether it be music or acting or whatever. So.
So getting back to your time in when you first started the program, did you have like a broad base of required like compositional styles in that program, or did you get
In
to
USC
focus?
or-
Yeah, at USC, and how did that like was that enabling you to study different composers and different styles of film writing, and then how did you pivot from that to actually working with some real
It's so
deal
funny because it's like, I mean, they have, John Burlingame is like a film music historian. It's just like brilliant. He's written all these books and done all these lectures and moderated so many film music talks. He comes in and teaches a course on the history of film music, which is a really refreshing part of that course, which is not really technical. It's all about the learning of where we've come from, no technology at all. And then in terms of the broadness, when I was there, I think it was the last year of the composer David Raxon, who was mainly known for writing the score and the jazz standard Laura. He was there. He actually started teaching at UCLA and then ended up doing, I think, both for a while, but then ended majority of his teaching career at USC, where he taught one course where he basically assigned the same clip that he assigned, I don't know, it was like 50 years or something like this, cue from a Charlie Chaplin movie that I think that he worked on or something in the 50s or 60s or whatever. And it's called Breakfast with Charlie. And it was kind of funny because it was like literally the same. Most you get like different clips to choose from, and it was like the same clip for every student every year he ever taught there. Something that it's like no one's recording Charlie Chaplin style music. But as far as the broad range, there was a point where our final project assignment was composer Christopher Young, who still teaches adjunct there. Allowed us to basically pick a scene from any movie in the world that we wanted to, and we used I think it was a 60-piece orchestra to score that, or 65. I think about 40 people were from USC, and about 15, 20 people were union members that would kind of help support that group, and score it any way you want. It's your final exam, do the best you can, and go for it. Like, use everything that you learned, and so you definitely get a wider range of styles that you see from different people. And I think there are other teachers that said, you can pick from maybe these 4 clips. But at the time when I was there, it was like, we're going to try and score a trailer now and see what your approach is to that, a video game clip or whatever. And I think it's evolved from where it was back then, because in terms of staying relevant, like, video games and multimedia is like, there's just so much content out there. Like, it would be ridiculous not to be exposed to the possibility of scoring those things and possibly supporting yourself. It's all about, at the end of the day, as far as being a composer, it's whatever medium you're in. Like, it's about composing music and then supporting yourself. That was, I think, another thing that few of us had to figure that out, because you want to go in there and score the sequel to E.T. that's never going to happen. We pull up our John Williams CD and re-record that, harmonically speaking to something. And it's like, that's a fantasy world that we're living in. Like, there's a more relevant, practical approach to what we're trying to do.
So what was your approach once you finished up at USC? Because
so
you've done a lot of work.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of random stuff. At the time, so again, I was still, at that time, like, it was the peak of my obsession with this Marco Beltrami, composer who had gone to USC, who helped me discover the program. And so there was a time where he actually came into one of the classes as a guest speaker or whatever, and Christopher Young actually introduced me to him as being a huge fan, and he did it in such a way that I'll never forget, because at this point, everyone in the class knew I was like, when I say obsessed, like, if you've ever been obsessed with anything, to a point where it was embarrassing. Like I was at that level, and he was the first person that I ever met where I actually could not speak. It was embarrassing. I tried. I was like, okay, this is your opportunity. This is what you've dreamed of, and I literally was tongue-tied. I might as well have been drooling at the mouth. But I ended up doing an internship with him. I was his first intern on the movie I, Robot, where he was hired to. And composers, this happens all the time. A composer their score wasn't working. He was replacing another composer, and he had 10 days to write the entire score. And I think it was like 110 minutes of music or something crazy. And I think there was like 5 or 8 days of recording with a full, like 100-piece orchestra at Fox. And I was there almost every session. And that was the beginning of a segue into, I'm not just a student here. I'm here to do whatever he's asking, whether it be get coffee or tape scores together or fetch mail or whatever. And from there, I ended up meeting a guy that was a copyist. And a copyist is a fully union job that people have full careers at sessions. Taking either orchestrators' work or composers' work and creating the parts and score for the session. I ended up getting a job working at the copy office, Joy and Kane Music Service, for a few weeks. That ended up leading to working as an assistant to a TV composer, John Ehrlich, and I was there for 3 years. And again, being an assistant to someone is another one of the, ways that people start the process of seeing the ins and outs at a less of a stress. I guess the varying degrees of stressful situations, low and high, but on a day-to-day basis for hopefully long periods of time, and many things that you just can't teach in the classroom in terms of like, what do you do if all of a sudden you can't get sound, or what are some ways to cross the finish line. Or, how does that composer produce his score? What's his workflow? Things that, the list goes on in terms of, being an entrepreneur. Almost every composer, whether they're Hans Zimmer or they're, just starting out, they're all entrepreneurs, and they create workflows and systems that work for them, and it's a process of refining those workflows the entire time until you find what works the best, So, I worked for a composer, John Ehrlich, for 3 years. He, at the time, he was doing the show House, which was a big show on Fox, and since then he's done Parenthood, was another big show that he was. But I remember when I met him in an interview for that position, he was saying, a lot of people haven't heard who I am, and I'm totally fine with that. I'm super comfortable. I'm so happy. Like, I have my family, my kids. I go home at night, and like I have a schedule, and like. It's like a well-oiled machine, so it's not about being the big this or that. Like, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard anyone say ever. At that point, it was always about moving forward and being the this and being the A-list that, or getting the call to do the next whatever part 2. So that was an interesting, thing in terms of learning workflow and seeing him work at a pace that was very different. Like, he would come in at the same time every day, go home for dinner, put the kids to bed, come back and work for like 2 more hours, and then leave around 8 or 9 p.m. and sleep at night, as opposed to working all night or being, scrambling or spitting out his score quickly. He'd like to write a few minutes of music every single day. It was just a part of his workflow, and it worked for him. So, and that I thought was important to see kind of some regularity in this. It seems to be a lot of randomness, and who knows what's going to happen today,
That's how we like our artists.
Yeah. We're super random.
Has there been anything that has held you back, in your opinion? I'm not talking necessarily about what you want to do now, but just maybe even from the beginning, was there some sort of?
I thought starting later in life held me back. Especially, again, the college thing. I felt like there were things I wasn't able to do. I was still trying to figure out what do these 2 instruments sound like together, or what are the ranges of the instruments or whatever in graduate school, as opposed to flushing out ideas and hearing a full composition, or expressing myself as an artist. I was really experimenting and learning what instruments sound like and discovering new instruments. And even again in LA, it was like orchestrationally, like there'd be instruments that you just don't see all the time, that it's like, maybe we use, Wagner horns or a Mahler hammer, things that you don't, sometimes you didn't even use that repertoire in college that use those instruments. I think, for me, I thought that, I've met a handful of people that started writing music in high school, and it's really a lifelong thing. I've always heard, and John Williams, he's my favorite composer, so I hate to keep going back to him, but he talks about being almost like a lifestyle where he personally, I don't know if he still does this, but I know years ago there were people that verified that he was writing music 6 days a week. He wasn't working on Sundays, but if he was not working on a movie, he was writing music on some level, because it's a writer's life. You're always writing, you're always refining, you're always figuring out ways to do that.
Stephen King does that too. I was reading about. He said he just has daily writing hours, whether he's doing a book.
I'm like,
or not,
where are these? I want to hear. What are you writing that no one wants? You don't want people. I want to hear the stuff you don't want people to hear.
So what's the easiest part of your life then? What's the easiest part of being Jermaine Stegall, the composer?
Oh gosh, I don't know that it's easy. I've never had that question before. What's the easiest part? I think enjoying what I do can be easy at times, because I try to find ways of, keeping it enjoyable. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't really want to feel like it's work. It is work, and it does feel like work most of the time. But the easiest part is, I think, when I've written something that I've inspired someone else or myself, feeling like I'm going to continue this, because this definitely feels like something that, composing specifically to me, it's an odd thing. It's not something I ever thought I would do. Even when I decided that I was interested in it, I didn't think that you could, one, make money at it, or two, that there were many people that I ever knew in my life that did it, whether it be successfully or not, just that were composers. I just hadn't met many, so it's always been kind of an odd thing. So the fact that I've kind of, I tell people all the time, I feel like in the last 3 years I actually finally figured out how to write music, and they're like, oh, that's a good thing. But what I meant by that was, I feel like there's been a sound or a level that I've been trying to get to, where I can literally express myself at a certain level, as opposed to just getting through the gig, or crossing the finish line, or getting some audio recorded that I say I wrote this. Actually have an expression that came from me, that was a vision, or translating a story that I'm seeing, images, actually, having the music match that story. I feel like, it's taken to the point where it's almost the last 3 years where I finally feel like, okay, I think I'm confident I can do this now. Up till now, I was happy that I was trying to do it, but now I'm finally happy that I can actually say something close to what it is that's in my head, which for a long time with a computer, because most of the stuff, I don't really write a lot of it down anymore. I still had to write a lot with pencil and paper, and I think to answer your question, sorry about these long answers, but staying interested in it is probably the easiest part. Sure. But it's not easy. It's actually very difficult.
Those overnight successes take at least 3 years.
Yeah. 3 decades. I would say a little more than that. Yeah.
So you were talking earlier about how it's every composer, they're just finding a workflow and basically going with it. How would you say your workflow has evolved, and basically what is it now? Do you have something that you feel is more of a defined workflow, you get a scene and you're like, this is how I'm going to do it, or is it kind of vary from
I think
project?
It actually does vary, believe it or not. I totally wish I had a streamlined way of doing things in terms of getting a project and then just doing it, but oftentimes certain scenes, depending on what the project is. I didn't do a feature film, I didn't score a feature film in 2016, But I've done about 20 over the 13 years I've been out there. And, often the process is, depending on if it's a really good movie, meaning it's shot well, the story is good, the acting is actually, the performances are like, you sit there and you go, wow, I believe this person. Like, for me, it used to be if a movie looks good, if it's shot on film, it's a good movie. Or if there's a good sound mix, if there's a good sound mix, it's a good movie. Like, I used to, argue with my older brother, who's seen more movies probably than anyone I know, about what's a good movie. Like, we'd see, I don't even throw any movies out and say that they were bad movies, but like something in theaters and be like, oh, that movie's garbage. It's like, what do you mean? That's a real movie. Of course, there's a certain level of good about it if it's finished and it's shot on film and it's, released widely. But good movies, a lot of the time, it's about, okay, how can we make this movie the best? And what are the thematic elements in it? What are the scenes that really hit home those elements and actually those tend to inspire me to start with those scenes. And maybe find the actual themes for, if we're using themes, find the theme for that character or characters around that scene or scenes, and work around, try to find ways of fitting that theme that I came up where I said, this is the most important part of this thing. It's going to help tie it all together in the beginning or the end, and then fill in the middle. I've often started from the beginning and just started scoring because it kind of feels like I'm, on this thing where it's like, it's all about getting to the finish line. But that's not always effective, and two, it doesn't always, I think, you're not able to spend the time with those, those scenes that are really important. It also helps, I think, when you get those really important scenes first. A lot of the other scenes will write themselves if they're relating to those other things or their story points. So I did a teen comedy, which I actually think is really good for a teen comedy. I don't watch teen comedies at all, but knowing what they were in all the John Hughes movies in the 80s, like I think there's something to be said about the genre of teen comedy. But I did one called Mono, which is on Netflix now, and there was kind of a innocent romantic love theme between our two main characters, and I actually thought that was the most important element of that story because the movie starts with them breaking up, which, obviously all the entire movie, they're going back and forth about why they broke up and all these things. And there are points where they come back together or they have a conversation or whatever. And it's just an important thing to be able to, okay, all those scenes are going to involve that musical material in some way, whether it's reharmonized or in a different key or whatever. So I don't have to sit there and try to score the scene, so to speak. You just kind of state their theme around their dialogue, and it kind of writes itself in a way, So, yeah.
It's kind of just about like finding the path of least resistance, like what inspires you first, or it's kind of when you're sitting down and watching a movie?
Depending on the project, what inspires you first. And there's actually a project that I might be up for when I go back that there was a teaser that was put out about a year ago. The feature film is shot, but there was a teaser scene that was shot as something that was going to help raise money that I've been watching over and over, using some of that material to inspire what I'm going to be pitching, of ideas of ways that I would score this movie, where I've actually taken samples of things that are in that sonic world of the story and actually incorporated them into music. I did like maybe 8 or 10 sketches of things that I'm going to be submitting as, these are things that I might play along with. This isn't the score to your movie, but these are things that obviously other composers do sometimes. Sometimes they'll read a script. I've done that a couple of times where I've gotten a job by reading a script and then coming up with some kind of musical idea to highlight what I thought was maybe the most important element. There's one script, a foreign film, making sure it wasn't kids throwing up at home or something. Come home. A foreign script. It was movies completely in Spanish, but they sent me an English script. There's a movie that came out in 2006 called Efectos Secundarios that was released through Warner Brothers Mexico, and I was like, this could be an interesting movie. I don't speak Spanish, but they're considering me. Like, I'll read the script. I hate reading. I'm not a reader, but I'll read the script. And there's a this magical scene in the script about this girl being surrounded with butterflies and involving love and fate and all these things. And so I did this almost Thomas Newman-esque kind of floaty music with these mandolins and bells and celestes and piano, like a piano theme kind of floating over it. And it was like, it literally, like everyone, I sent these things to Mexico and they're like, this is the guy, he gets the story, he gets the core of what it is. It's about hope, it's about fate or whatever. And so, again, that was another way where it was like, whatever can inspire the idea. And a lot of the ideas surrounding the score came from that demo for that one scene. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the final thing in the movie, but it was like, okay, this is our approach. This is the sound of the movie. So sometimes it's about getting a sound, and, there's a lot of scores that are more textural than they are thematic. So sometimes you're manipulating sound for a week or 2 weeks, trying to come up with textures that either haven't been heard before or just come from the world of the things that you're seeing, whether it be, I don't know, a basketball court, maybe manipulating shoe squeaks or basketballs becoming like a pulse or something like that, that can be used as loops, at any point in the movie. These are all things that are like almost more commonplace now to think of it as a starting point. What is the sonic world that you're in? And then, maybe sharing some of your musical sound design with the actual sound designers of the movie to make it feel like there's a more cohesive, I don't even know where the score begins and ends and where the sound design begins. Those are things that I think they weren't always a thing of, let's think of that first. But that's often, if it's not some giant action movie or sci-fi movie, there's a lot of ways of, getting those things done too.
So how much of the film, when you're actually, going to start writing, how much of a percentage of the time do you actually have the finished video that you're working with? And like you just said on this one, you got inspired from the script. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of like not as frequent doing it that way, or do you mostly get to use the finished? It's not as frequent.
I mean, you want to be on as early as the script. Now, when I did that, the movie was actually shot, and so what me doing that demo did was get them to the point where they actually sent me a scene and said, okay, look, you did that thing, it blew us away. If you can score the scene and you're in the realm, you are the guy. Like, there's also, what was the other part of your question?
The question is it more common that you get the finished product?
Yeah, in the film world, yes, and also the TV world, same thing. It's like, depending on what you're working on, like, there's varying degrees of, I've worked on. I'm just thinking of people that I worked for and things that I worked on where it's like a little bit chaotic because of the experience level of people that are working at a high level that haven't done it for a while. But when it's working right, generally, in television, sometimes you get picture and you're only scoring for 3 or 4 days. And on I would say an hour-long episodic, you could have anywhere between, I would say, upper 20s to early 30 minutes of music or so per episode that you only have like 3 or 4 days to write the music, have them hear it, give you notes, and turn around maybe 1 or 2 passes on it. I've been, in many situations where we're like on version 8 just because there's too much time, I won't say too much time, but there's more time than they're used to having, so they nitpick. But
is that the strictest deadline you've had? Is 2 or 3 days?
Sometimes I've done, the gamut of things where sometimes I didn't really take credit for it, but it was a random idea that I had in my head that I wanted to, maybe, do a handful of Christmas movies at some point. And generally, Christmas movies are low budget or direct to video or made for TV. And there was one that the budget was so low that I was just like, okay, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this whole thing in like 2 days, but I'm going to let you give me 1 pass of notes. It's going to be stream of consciousness as fast as I can do it. because it's just like it's inappropriate that the budget is. But I wanted to do a Christmas movie, so it's funny. Like it's on Netflix now. My kids love it. Like it's these talking dogs, and it's like okay, great. I mean, you can't beat that. I got that out of my system.
My mom, any movie with talking animals, my mom thinks should get an Academy Award.
Oh,
she
really?
loves them. She loves them.
Man, there's like a whole thing. There's
Dunstan checks.
There's the dog that saved this. There's the dog that saved that. You know, I have a friend of mine that scored the dog that saved Christmas, Easter, the dog that saved New Year's. It's all talking dog things. But again, for me on that one, it was like, literally, it's almost like, okay, this is kind of fun. Like, how fast can I write? Like, this isn't about most people. I didn't think that the movie was even going to get distribution. That was part of my problem. But here it is, like it's out there. But I did it under an alias, so it's fine. Man, it's not bad. It was how fast can I do it? Not like how bad can I do it. So I don't know if that answered that question, but that was interesting.
Well, so then when you do get you're getting finished product mostly, I guess one of the questions is, I thought that was excellent how you said that, you try to draw from the sonic characteristics of what you're seeing, as part of maybe your content. But how do you determine tempos? That's always, because we have an audio for film class here, and we work really hard on trying to say, okay, what is the tempo of what you're seeing? Because they have a project usually where they take 3 minutes or 4 minutes of and they strip it out and they replace everything. So how do you determine?
Well,
your
it's
tempos?
several things. I mean, sometimes, number one, most of the time when I get picture, whether it be film or TV, there's almost always temp music in there. Music that's temporarily supposed to really be filler a lot of the time. Sometimes it's the music editors or director will spend a long time creating a temporary score to help shape exactly what they have, the score that they have in mind. Some people literally, it goes back to it, like writers will write stories with scores playing in the background to help them conjure up ideas. And sometimes that stuff will end up in temp score. And, we have this thing called temp love, where sometimes a director or producers will fall in love with something, and it's like, come close to that. That sometimes dictates tempo. There are some editors out there that are actually rhythmic people. In the creative realm, I've met, people in the mixing and audio world that were musicians, burning jazz players that have gone to school to do that, and they end up mixing. And so, sometimes editors have backgrounds in music, and there are people that are just out there that, I don't know everyone that has this background, but that have a background in music or rhythm, and sometimes they edit rhythmically, and it's something that I think I wouldn't have noticed growing up, but like as you get further and further along, again, it's like, telling the difference between what's a good movie and a bad movie. Like there's certain things that just make a movie good. Obviously it's all subjective, but in terms of editors, like there's an art form that it's like, as much as I impress them, and how do you create music? Like there's some things that people can do with material that, could be totally drastically different or better or more sad or more dramatic just by the way something's edited. So the editing style of something is always also determines tempo, but then also what the scene is in the director's head, sometimes what it's supposed to do. If the goal of this specific scene is to elevate tension, sometimes it might not have a tempo. It may just have something that's sonically, gripping or makes you feel tense. Or if it, sometimes they talk about things wanting to speed up at certain points. They don't always mean that. You learn sometimes what they think of as speeding up is adding subdivisions within the beat. And so, sometimes you can seemingly speed things up by starting really slow and then having things add more instruments or adding subdivisions. So, and also, if the dialogue is medium pace, dialogue, everything kind of, a lot of things, well, I won't say everything, but I guess a lot of things revolve around dialogue. That's always like the king in the realm of mixing. In your final dub stage, the dialogue is the top layer of what's most important to come across, and then sound effects, and then music is always on the bottom, not as a weird, we're getting stepped on. It's just like it's the glue. It's just seen as glue, really, music, tying everything together. And if you can get a score that's on some level stands out on its own after, like it's like, I don't know how you did that, but good job. Like it's not easy to do, is to have a score that you can listen to and you either remember the story or it's effective as music, and especially with technology, the way things are temped, and sometimes movies are edited up to, because of technology, the week or two before they're released in theaters. Like those are things that couldn't happen years ago because, having things being printed to film and then having those films duplicated to get to all the cinemas at the same time or whatever. So yeah.
Are you still able to enjoy a film now that you've kind of seen how the sausage has been made? My wife is a theater person, and we'd go see shows, and she started watching, and she's just, they did this, that. I'm like, just watch the show. I mean, is that, has that changed for you at all? Do you watch with a more critical ear, I should say, or are you able to still kind of kick back and say, this is a good...
It's both. It's really weird. It's like I'm hyper-focused. So I saw Rogue One, and for me, like, I'm on this, like, highly obsessive Lucasfilm and Star Wars, I would say binge,
What's your
but
shirt
like...
say?
Well, it's the Lucasfilm thing. Oh. Not that you... but, yeah, I'm highly into that world, so... And I know a lot of the people that work there, and like, those things are they're so passionate about the material because, a lot of, we grew up with this stuff, and so it's amazing. And, I have a lot of aspirations to, end up in that, genre and doing things for them at some point. And so for me, seeing Rogue One, it was like, okay, it was like one of these things where it's okay, it's the first Star Wars related movie with a non-John Williams score, so it's like I'm interested in that aspect of it. I'm also interested in it's the first it's the first of and on many levels, and so it's like it was kind of interesting to try to take all those elements in, and it's very much the composer's own style, but it still harkens to the old a lot of the things that were happening at that time as far as the Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica style of, the 70s of scoring. And it's interesting, again, like he only had like 4.5 weeks to do that score. So in my mind, like I'm kind of thinking, what could be done in 4.5 weeks by one person and effective and actually work and be approved by the studio and, all these things. But then also like, wow, look at that ship and you want to get into the story and like enjoy it as a piece. There are times where I just kind of slip in and out of thinking about, does this sound like my opinion of what this should sound like, or he probably wrote this way because he needed to get it approved, or not in a weird way, but there's only so much time, and but then this totally sounds like him being him in this moment, or this is just wait, I didn't even pay attention there. That's really interesting, So I slip in and out of it, I think, and that was like a exaggerated example because it was like I was very interested in so many elements of that movie, and a lot of the times I think that way, but I just have to, and the way I work and the way my brain works is I do things over and over, whether it be composing something, like sometimes it starts with one layer and I'm refining the entire time, and with movies that I think I'm gonna like, I have no choice but to watch them many times because I can't get everything out of it, that I need to get out of it by watching it once, if it's worth doing.
See if we could go into a little bit more about, being an assistant, that you were talking about, how you probably could do a whole podcast just on that. And talking
Easily.
about, like how you feather into those kind of jobs.
Yeah. So being an assistant, I don't have an assistant now. A lot of the tasks that an assistant would do, for long periods of time, most composers that are starting off doing what I do need to be able to do everything, whether it's maintain your gear, obviously responding and, to emails, developing relationships with people, having some type of social media presence that's vibrant. When I say vibrant, I just mean it's active, not like posting one thing a week or a month that has nothing to do with what you do. Showing, a certain amount of, being relatable to many aspects of what you do, and whether it be, I don't know, going to other events or music events or things that relate to you to kind of communicate either a lifestyle or a story of who you are as a person, because at the end of the day, like people, it's like real people that we're interacting with at after all the dust settles. It's not just about what's on the internet or your resume or anything. Like, people want to work with actual people. Connecting by phone or taking meetings with people, those are things that need to be figured out and scheduled. Scheduling is big. Again, depending on where you're working, if you're working at a studio where there are many composers, I know that Hans Zimmer has created a culture where he's the first one to popularize and kind of change the game in terms of creating a culture of composers that openly work for other composers in terms of writing their music, or there being a hierarchy where you can start from the bottom and then maybe one day be writing additional music or getting credit on someone else's score, or potentially, because of your relationship with that composer, getting your own movie or your own career. Like, whole careers have happened because of this culture that he's created. And
how does that work? Does he? Because in my mind, what you just said is Hans Zimmer doing the big ones, big pieces, and then some of the other.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and like he was the one of the first people to openly say, like, and have maybe interns coming in starting at whether they're wrapping cables or there's a way to wrap cables, guys. Making coffee. There's a way to make coffee. And when I say that, it's not just like hitting a button. Like, there's certain people, not him specifically, but there's certain people in the world, if their coffee is not right, like, there's a huge problem. Like, it's very important. And there's coffee is getting more and more sophisticated as we speak. But maintaining the gear, understanding the gear, being able to maybe step in and, I don't know, do who knows what task. It's just like a long list of random things. Whether it be, I don't know, there's editing, audio editing, things like that end up happening. But with Hans Zimmer, he kind of popularized, the idea that maybe you can write an additional cue. And again, like, I don't want to ever badmouth anyone, but it's an open thing where he was openly doing a lot of that. And he has, still has a host of composers that rent rooms at his studio, remote control, that they all have successful careers now, but they're under his umbrella of, when you're, following that, there's a certain prestige of even being around him or having a picture with him. It's like there's a certain level of iconic, weight that comes with, I came through the Hans Zimmer camp, like kind of like I went to North Texas or whatever, and I played in the 1 o'clock. Like, it's just a thing in town. Like, if you work, it's like, oh, you work with Hans, then maybe, and he's also ushered, opportunities where people have asked him to do scores where it wasn't something that he wanted to do, but they were just dying to have the quote unquote Zimmer sound that he created a sound. And there are people that are coming up where he's, agreed to kind of oversee the score, or like you said, maybe write the themes and then have someone else write the score. There's not just him. There's other many composers that have done that, where they've said that they'll write the main themes and then oversee the process of, and make sure they get the sound that they think that they're getting. Because at the end of the day, there's Hans has a workflow that is his way. It's a way of doing things, and it's like, if it's not that way, it's not a way that fits in that world. Not that it's wrong in the universe, but it's that way. So, and it works. So,
what's your gear your default gear that you use for composition?
Right now,
in terms of software and do you use like a composition program too, like Finale? Or
I use Digital Performer as my main DAW workstation for composing. It was the one that was taught mainly at USC when I was there, and then they went back and forth with Logic now. Cubase is probably the most popular DAW out there right now. It's what Zimmer and James Newton Howard and a host of many others that have switched from other programs. And I think partly because it's really written well for the medium that we do in terms of scoring and the things that are available. I'm just kind of unrefined in terms of learning a new. I'm a slow learner, but I was just talking to someone yesterday. Pro Tools is something that a few composers that are working at the A level use in terms of sequencing MIDI in Pro Tools, which is not a popular thing to do, but it's possible. But Cubase is probably the most popular, and as far as workflow, Vienna Ensemble Pro is made by the guys that write Cubase, Steinberg. I have 3 machines that run Vienna Ensemble Pro that are basically they host samples basically. So one machine is basically just brass and percussion only. One machine is just synthesizers and choir and orchestral effects, and one machine is just strings and synth loops only. And the reason is it's in terms of what the computer can handle, combined with the amount of RAM that computer can hold. Those 2 elements are why I have 3 machines. For me, it was more cost effective to slowly build to where I can have, and most composers that do what I do, which is bounce around from many different projects, working from many different people, some myself, some other people, and have most of the instruments that I like available to me at all the time in my templates. So I open up my template and everything that I want is available immediately, and also routed in such a way that if I need to print stems where it's like woodwinds only or strings only or brass, high percussion, low percussion, I can literally in one pass print all the instruments, the separated stems together and the full mix with the effects and all that stuff. As far as gear, my main computer is it's a old 6-core computer, a Mac Pro, and I have a 12-core Mac Mini and an 8-core, I think.
And those 3 all linked together.
They're all linked together with Vienna. It's just crazy to think about, like back in the day when, and I'm a slow learner. Those MIDI cables, like, when you wanted to have a big template, like you had to have all these different, MIDI cables running from here and there, and then you go inside your MIDI window and make sure all those same computers, those modules are mapped up, and if something accidentally got unplugged or deleted, you have to like daisy chain and remember where everything is, and now it's one Ethernet cable transfers MIDI and all that audio, multiple channels of audio per machine with one Ethernet cable, so it cleaned a lot of that gear up and like made it, I won't say obsolete, but unnecessary for my workflow. And I mean, the gear, it could expand forever and ever in terms of like outboard reverbs and different things that I would love to have at some point, but right now it's most of it's all internal as far as effects and things that I use, and I don't use a lot of effects on my stuff, but I do personally exaggerate the panning of the orchestra. Most of the samples, when you get them, whether it be string or percussion or woodwinds, they're recorded in the sections of the orchestra that they would be in. So they play the stereo sample plays where it should play. But for me, I exaggerate that panning a little bit more to get a little bit more of a spatially dynamic mock-up as I'm creating it. So I'm kind of not thinking about the fact that I'm mixing it as I'm writing, because there's not time to go back and mix once it's approved or whatever. It's like, once it's approved, you just, like, it's already uploaded and they have everything anyway, so it's like, you just don't have to do anything. You're done.
So where can people find your stuff online? So you talk about a social media presence and everything, but if they want to listen to things you've done, where's probably the best source?
Yeah,
for
my
that?
website, JermaineStegall.com, is, I try to have that be the hub. I often post things on Instagram, I'm obviously on Facebook. I have a like page, as everyone and their mother does these days. But I try to post things that are only, related to music that I do on the Facebook like page. And obviously SoundCloud, I don't really do the social thing on SoundCloud, but most of my music is on my website is from my SoundCloud page and Twitter and,
Your website is amazing, by the way.
Thanks.
I
created that myself. Unfortunately, I was told that I wouldn't have to, but there's a certain point where it was like crickets, and I was like, I thought you said you were gonna. Okay, I guess here we are. Okay.
Like the video of you conducting those pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, did you? Those are amazing recording and an amazing video. Was that part of a deal, or did you have to basically pay for creating those like spots?
Yeah, a lot of the things, like some of the things, I think there might be a couple sessions where there's sessions for actual projects, but there's some videos on there where I actually paid to have someone capture what it is that I do in a more vivid way because, again, technology is so good now. Unfortunately, sometimes it costs money to show a little bit more clearly what it is that you're doing. And, it's like money tends to be this barrier sometimes in terms of creativity. There's other ways of doing things now. I'm sure, someone could put a team together and do something comparable to what I've done in terms of that demonstration. But the videos and conducting and all that, it was a lot of that stuff was, hiring a small team of people to come in and document what I was doing, and
It's exceptional.
oh, thank you, thank you, thanks, appreciate it. At least you're listening to it.
That's phenomenal.
That's good.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Oh, of course,
Yeah.
of course.
The following music, called Main Title, was composed by Jermaine Stegall.